what I want to try to say to people to explain the experiences that I've had and the experience of myself that I have every moment since I was 21 and I had what people colloquially refer to as like an experience with the Kundalini. I don't think words can really aptly describe the thing that we're talking about. And what we are talking about, we're talking about some kind of substance, in the sense that you talk about yourself or your body or your ego. We kind of don't have a good philosophical framework for what that substance really is, and what our self is, what our identity is. Of course, mostly would consider it the physical, biological body form, but this kind of science is evolving constantly. I think part of the issue is we aren't able to really detect with our physical senses other spectrums of matter and of energy, which I experience as being part of myself, as comprising myself. And that's what I have a hard time putting into words, of course. So when we say ourself, generally, colloquially, I think the assumption we're talking about kind of like an information, kind of an intangible idea of ourselves. That's what we're talking about. Some people might have a little bit more advanced theories. They might talk about consciousness or something like that. But still, we don't really have any kind of understanding of the substance of the actual thing. Like, what is it that we're talking about, right? We have this kind of stream of experience of ourselves, and we kind of just come up with a conceptual label of it and call it the ego or the self or consciousness. But what is it that we're really talking about? So when we point to ourselves and say this is me, or when we think of ourselves, we don't really have, we're kind of schizophrenic. We kind of have we're kind of two minds about it. I think science, the kind of common intellectual, if you want to say, understanding of what we are, that we grew up with, is biological and chemical. So, okay, what are chemicals? What are cellular organisms? When you go down further, and there's molecules and atoms and things like that. So we kind of view our physical form as this kind of atomic density, this coagulation of little tiny pinballs, or little tiny bits of stuff. But I don't think that really extends to what we mean when we talk about ourselves, like our identity apart from our physical body. I don't think anybody really, despite the best efforts of the materialist scientists, the Newtonians, and the people who are hell-bent on insisting that debunking anything metaphysical. I don't think any of those people were fully able to really convince the majority of humanity that that's what they mean, what they experience as their inner reality. So we're left with this situation where we kind of have this like split view of our identity, where on the one hand, we can look in the mirror and we can see that those atoms are there, but on the other hand, we can't look in the mirror and see ourselves. We ideate about our form and come up with ideas about ourselves, but we don't know where those ideas are per se. We say they're in the brain, or they're caused by the brain, or they interact with the brain in some way. But I think anybody would be hard pressed to say that an idea is like the same thing as matter, right? I don't think nobody can think that, and we don't have that experience. The scientists can say whatever the fuck they want, but everybody and their grandma understands and has that experience and doesn't accept that that consciousness that we're experiencing inside of our heads, ostensibly, other parts of our body, of course, because you can feel your toes and you can move your hands. So the consciousness that we experience. I don't think anybody is saying that, and especially the subtleties of emotion and all of this. I think people kind of balk at the idea that these are all just chemical phenomena, that ideas are some kind of like random, chemicals firing in the brain. I don't think anybody experiences that, and I don't think majority of humanity thinks that. So I'm just dealing with common understanding, not talking about religion and all that. But my main focus and my main point that I'm trying to make is that we don't really have a idea of the substance of our identity, of our real identity. Of those that whatever that thing is that we experience between our heads. Now, oddly enough, going back to when I was 21, and I was sitting outside my mom's house in my backyard, and a bolt of lightning came over my head. I've told this story over and over again, and I hope one day I can be put in contact with the right people who can measure this force in my head. But still, that hasn't materialized yet. Hopefully, maybe soon. Anyway, so the first experience that I had was with a lightning bolt not a physical lightning bolt, of course. It was, let's call it an etheric lightning bolt. It was very blissful and powerful, like physically, tangibly powerful. I'm not talking about, and again, this is why it's so difficult for me to to say what I want to say about my experience of these etheric senses, these etheric realities, these etheric substance. My experience of these things is on a sensory level, apparently, that other people don't experience. Now, I'm 38 now, so that's going on 17 years. That's longer than than a lot of people have lived, and maybe even some people listening to this. But I've almost spent half of my life like this now, and so I can kind of plainly say that I'm practically a mutant. But my point of even speaking about any of these things is because the transformation which I've gone through is perfectly possible of anybody. I firmly believe, unless you're an NPC, probably not if you're an NPC, but anybody on the spectrum of like psychics to somatics. Of course, somatics are born with this experience, or they get struck with a lightning bolt when they're 21 and then it reactivates. But somatics and psychics can, I fully do believe, kind of go through this alchemical transformation. Anyway, back to my point. The lightning bolt, the etheric bolt, went through my head, and it went through the rest of my channels, or my centers rather, through the channel, the central channel. So I'll get to that in a second. So I went to sleep, and it lasted for a good 2 or 3 minutes. And I was just so, we used to call it blissing out. I was so enraptured with this transformational, transcendental, like electromagnetism that I had never dreamed was possible. I was so fixated on that for good reason, of course, because this is a transformational power. I woke up the next morning and I felt just a little subtle tingle in my forehead, and then it slowly expanded into my brain, and then I started to see lights and visions. So from what I've gathered, I've spent so much time and what I want people to understand is that I've managed to know these things simply through inference. I can infer things based on what I experience with these etheric senses. I can infer things about the ultimate nature of reality, because this thing is like it's like, in Tibetan Buddhism we call it the wisdom body. This thing it's like full of this wisdom, and you just have to just observe it with your mind. Anyway, so I started to observe this thing which seemed to be in my head, and it kind of slowly expanded through my brain, and it went down my chest into my belly, and then it came back up from the ground another time. About 8 or 9 years after this happened, I had another experience like that, and it went up from my feet, and it was triggered by a girl I was talking to, and that's a whole nother story. But whatever that subtle degree of consciousness, it's interlinked with this Kundalini. It's interlinked with this electromagnetic power. So when we talk about we have a substance of our biological form, we understand that matter and all that. We need to add on that there's also this energy of the self. And of course, it's likely that one is the expression of the other or something like that. You know, it's probably the case that the energy of the self is like this platonic, perfect ideal of us. And I think that that's really what it is. We're always trying to strive towards this ideal self. And the physical form is just like a shadow which kind of trails along. And maybe even evolution is kind of influenced in this way. Maybe there's actually an interconnected like web of ideas that influence biology in some way. But so in Buddhism, I would say, like when you conceptualize yourself, you get like it's based on the body, and it's always delusional. It's always full of inconsistencies when you analyze it, and that's what Buddhism tries to do: is deconstruct the part of your mind which insists on identifying with the body. It's Mara. The demiurgic tendency, Mara, is responsible for that. So when the Buddha attained his enlightenment, there's that part where Mara takes his own form and he looks at him, and you've probably seen the video with Keanu Reeves. There's a video out there of Keanu Reeves as the Buddha, and there's Mara. He's looking into a pool of water, and Mara appears in his reflection and grabs him by the arm. And the Buddha pulls him up, and he looks at him and he says, "Mara, you will not rebuild your house again." So when we conceptualize ourselves based on the form, we get Mara, we get our ego. But when you understand that your form is really this light body, this energy of the self, this Kundalini, this consciousness, and again, this is why it's so difficult to talk about, because there's so many fucking names for the thing on the other side of the physical form that we don't really quite understand, the soul, whatever you want to call it. Let's do that, because that's clear and that's easy for English speakers. We'll say the soul. The psyche. I love that soul and psyche. That psyche means soul in Greek. I love that. The soul, the mind. So the more that we identify with our souls, it's like this ideal. It's like this ideal, and we're trying to fix this like error in reality that started with the fall and duality and separation and all that. So you resolve all that in the non-dual self. All of that's resolved in this wisdom body. So all you need to do is really meditate on the energy of the self, and you'll be enlightened. That's easy. Alright, I want to make more content soon, and I would like to teach some meditation on the third eye also, which is one of the things I blew up for back in the day, probably the main thing. So maybe we do that more in the future. Thank you guys.